Hello everyone, this is Becky Johnson with Sweetheart Quilt Design Company, and today we're here to show you how to put a sleeve, a hanging sleeve on the back of your quilt that already has the binding completed without having to take the binding off. So I made this cute teapot quilt a while back and I didn't put a sleeve on it, and I don't really want to unstitch all that and have to restitch it. So I came up with a method to put a sleeve on without having to do that. Now, just wanted to show you a little bit about the sleeve. So on this one, you can see that there's two layers here, and this layer lays flat, and this one comes up a little bit, so it's big enough to put a rod inside of there. This back one holds it flat, and then the rod comes through here. If you don't have that and you put a rod in, it'll curl around the rod on the front of your quilt, so it doesn't look as nice. Okay, so I went ahead, I had some leftover backing fabric, and so I went ahead and cut an 8.5 inch wide piece. That's why I love this 8.5 inch wide ruler. And now I need to trim it so that it is the right length for the quilt, for the hanging sleeve. So I'm going to just lay it up here and trim one end to make sure it's straight. So I'll I'm lining up with the line on my ruler, and then I'm going to trim that off. And then I'm going to lay this out so it's just a little wider than the quilt, not much. Whoops, I have to scoot it down so I can stitch it. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and line up so we're straight and trim that off. Now we need to hem the ends is the first thing we need to do. So I'm going to take this over to the iron. I'm going to need that in just a minute over here at the ironing board. And what I like to do, you can just fold this like this and stitch it. And what I like to do is just take it and lay it back. I just find I get it a little bit straighter when I do that. And so I'm just laying it back, and then I'm going to lay it over a second time, just about a 1/2 inch. And my wrinkles pressed out of this, and do the same thing on the other end. So just lay it back. And lay it back again. All right, now I'm going to stitch these real quickly, and just a color that coordinates with your sleeve will work. On this one, because of some of the stitching we're going to do, you do need a color that blends with your binding or the top of your quilt. Oops. And I stitched that very straight. It won't matter. Usually it does, but oh, I know what I'm having trouble with. I got my needle position changed. There we go. Much better. Okay, now when you normally do one before you put your binding on, you can just fold it in half and just stitch it in up there. But since the binding is already done, we can't do that. So what we're going to do, I want to fold this down 3 inches and stitch it there. So I'm going to take my ruler, and so I want 3 inches here, and this is 8.5 inches. So I'm going to fold it down 3 inches, and that takes up 3 inches. So I'm just going to lay my ruler at 2.5 inches right here, and then just butt this edge up to that, and then go ahead and press it. So you can see here that it's a little hard to see, but you can see I've got a fold there with 3 inches up here. So let me get this. So I'm going to lay it at 2.5 inches. And then press this and get down here and butt up to my ruler and press that. Okay, so now I've got a nice crease right there. And I'm going to take this over here and I'm going to lay it so that the big part is up above the quilt. And get that centered. And then I'm going to take the fold and I'm going to put pins in. Now I want to stitch, when I flip it over, I'm going to want to stitch from this end. So I'm going to want the pins to work for that. So I think I can just put them in like this, but I'm going to have to reach underneath the sleeve and pull them out. So I'm just pinning it about every 6 inches or so. Okay, now we're going to take it and flip it over, and we're going to do what quilters call stitch in the ditch. And so I'm going to stitch in here just as close as I can get to where my binding is stitched. And this is going to sew in my sleeve so it still has that strength of a machine sewn seam at the top. Okay, so I've got this laid down, and it's just a little tricky to do this. Oh, and you want to do this with a walking foot because you're working with a lot of layers of fabric. I have a built-in walking foot on my machine. So I'm just staying off the binding, but just right next to it. So you really can't see the stitching. Oh no. No, I'm okay. I thought I let my fabric get wrinkled up and stitched it in weird, but I caught it just in time. Takes a little bit of time to do this, but it's still faster than hand sewing it. And it's stronger. I'm going to check it every once in a while, make sure everything's still laying flat. Okay. And this worked out nicely for me to leave the pins in, but if that doesn't work for your machine, pull them out as you go. Okay, then what we're going to do is we're just going to take these two edges. Oh, I was looking for my start threads at the wrong end. Okay, we're going to take these two edges and pin them together. And this is wrong sides together, so we'll actually be sewing the seam on the opposite side of the fabric because we're putting wrong sides together. So we'll be sewing it on the right side, but when we get all done, this seam is going to be hidden inside this, or yeah, next to the quilt, inside the sleeve. So it won't be seen at all. So I'm just pinning these together. Okay, and then we're just going to go ahead and sew that in. Put one more pin in. Oh, just your 1/4 inch seam works fine on this. I'm going to do a quick back stitch on this just to hold that in together because we're not going to be crossing it again with anything else. I was glad when I figured out this little method to do this because the first few times I did it, I did all that unsewing and putting the sleeve on and then re-sewing the binding. So. And again, I'm going to do a quick back stitch. And there we go. So now what we're going to do is we're going to press that seam flat, and we're going to lay this down so we can get our press the seam at the bottom. So kind of have to do them both at the same time, just a little tricky, but very doable. So I'm just under here, I'm making sure that the seam is flat, and then I'm just pulling it down. So I look under here and it's laying flat, and I just pull this down so that it's laying flat up here and down here, and just work my way down the quilt like that. Okay. Now all we have left is to sew the bottom. So we want, at the beginning of the video, I showed you that that sleeve, and remember we wanted a little extra fabric up here. So what we're going to do is just take this and bend it back so that that seam, that crease we pressed in, is about 1/4 of an inch up. A little harder to see on this fabric. I'll show it to you again on that other one. So I'm just going to pin it, and as I work my way across. So on this one, it showed up a little easier to see, not too much. So but I pulled up that 1/4 inch. Okay, I won't make you watch me pin this all the way across, but you'll need to pin it all the way across, and then that makes sure that your back piece is laying flat and you get it in the right position if you pin it. Okay, so then we're going to pin it all the way across, and then we're going to hand sew the bottom. So you want to get a piece of thread. Now, thread is directional, believe it or not. I was sort of surprised the first time somebody told me that, but it works. It's much easier to work with the direction it comes off the spool. So I pulled it off. I like to thread the fresh cut end. So I thread it and then pull it all the way through. I'll show you that. So rather than thread the needle like this, I find it much easier to needle the thread. So you can see I've got that thread just pinched between my thumb and finger, and I'm just going to put the needle down on top of it. Now the needle is directional too. They have to poke that hole from one side or the other. So if you have any trouble getting it to go on there, just flip your needle around. Whoa. Okay. There we go. Okay, so I got it. And then I'm just going to pull this all the way through and go ahead and tie the knot in that end. If you work with your thread going the correct direction, it actually tangles less. Okay, so I'm going to come in underneath here, being careful not to go through to the top of my quilt. And I'm going to secure the end. A couple stitches. And then I'm going to start working my way across. So I like to go through the quilt back, but you have to be very careful you're not coming through to the front. And then I just come up and grab grab a thread, just like you would when you're sewing a binding on. And these stitches won't show because when the fold comes down, they'll be covered up. But you want them often enough in there that it secures it. So then you can see that we've got that extra 1/4 inch down here, which gives us a 1/2 inch of room for your rod to go through. So you just stitch it all the way across and you're done. Thank you very much. Be sure and like and subscribe to our channel, and the like button is down below the screen. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time.